Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our July 7th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler. Today, we bring you an insider's look at how the National Pork Board developed its new slogan and strategy to increase pork consumption domestically. Then we'll head up to Ames, where Iowa State University is teaming up with Alliant Energy to study how specialty crops, like fruits and vegetables, can share the same space as pollinators and solar panels. Let's start with Al Wolfkuhl of the National Pork Board, who wants U.S. consumers to taste what pork can do. Spokesman reporter Corey Munson has the story.
Today I'm joined by Al Wolfkuhl, immediate past president of the National Pork Board. And you are a farmer from eastern Iowa, Buchanan County specifically. First of all, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Pork Board.
To get involved with the Pork Board, I had this desire to slow down a little bit and give back to the industry, and so we cut back operations a little bit, and I got started in about 2013 with the Iowa Pork Board, and I moved my way up, and I was president in 2016. I had been on some committees with the National Pork Board, and they asked me if I'd run, and I said yes, and so I moved up and president last year, and as of a couple of days ago, I'm now past president. So it's been a good journey. I've met a lot of great people, and hopefully I'm making a little difference.
Well, and it's always great to have, Iowa has a voice in this process, obviously being the national leader in pork production. It's a good thing to be involved.
Absolutely.
So today we really want to hit on the new domestic campaign by the Pork Board to kind of encourage folks to come in. So you guys announced the new tagline just a few months ago. Can you tell us what the tagline is and then just briefly describe it?
It's taste what pork can do. We did the research, understanding our consumers better. We tested different taglines, and this one resonated the best. A lot of people know bacon, they know pepperoni, they know the sausage, they know the taste of pork, and we just want to show them what else pork can do.
And as I understand it, a big part of this is using data to target specific demographics within the consumer base. So can you tell us a little bit about where that comes from, how that came about? Explain that to us a little.
This process started probably in 2023. Producers were having a tough time financially, and the board of directors were in a meeting, and the question got brought up, is there more that we could do? We felt as the board, we're responsible for pork checkoff dollars. This is the producer's investment in the checkoff. And we had just done the segmentation study, the research that showed what consumers want, why they want it, what the younger generation is eating, the different demographics, right? Different parts of the country, different ethnicities. And we had done some smaller marketing campaigns, and we did some of those in 23 and 24, and we had some amazing returns on investment. So we knew what we did was working. We had the data, we had the insights, and it was just obvious to all of us. We have to roll out and do a major national marketing campaign. And then it was staffing up, getting the right people in place, hiring a marketing firm, and rolling it out. So this is where we're at.
Well, I know a big part of it was hiring of Dr. David Newman and him constructing a team to use this data most efficiently. So you want to talk about that decision and what his team does?
Yes. So we have Kirsten Hafer on staff that did the data and the insights. And at that time, we were handing it to the industry and saying, look at this great information we have, expecting them to use it. And then the decision was made that, hey, we need to promote this ourselves. We're the ones that are passionate about this, and we're the ones that really want to help out our consumers and help out our producers. And so David Newman coming in, he's high energy. I don't know if you've ever met David, and he's just so passionate about this. But it wasn't just David. We brought some other key individuals on board also to get this project to the finish line. Our Jose de Jesus, he does multicultural. He's awesome. Patrick Fleming came in and joined us. We've got an awesome team to put together to run this campaign.
That is really wonderful. And yes, Dr. Newman appeared on this podcast here about 14 months ago, I guess. So What has been the initial response just a few months into the launch of this campaign?
It's been amazing. Corey, we did this right. We built it from the ground up. We got producer input. We got the packers, processors, retailers. Pretty much everybody's on board now, excited about it. And the reason why is because we're showing that the value that we create with pork can help the profit margins of everybody included and make life better for consumers also.
If we're moving more pork, that by itself is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
So when we talk about the segmentation, can you kind of explain a little bit more or maybe give an example of kind of how that works? So let's say we have a person who is 25 years old, living in Los Angeles, who is bilingual, English, Spanish, and comes from a Hispanic background. That person would have kind of a slot within the overall campaign, right, that they fit into?
You just described one of our best customers, Corey. The Hispanic community loves pork, and they love pork as an ingredient. And so when we target that generation, they want convenience, they want taste and flavor, they want pork as an ingredient, not a center of the plate pork chop. So this is all about giving consumers more of what they want and showing them what else they can do. And a lot of that is food is love, right? I mean, this is generational. It's come from, this is what your grandma gave you, your mom gave you, and you want to pass that tradition on to your kids. And so it's really looking at each segment of the consumer and trying to give them more of what they love.
So is part of this introducing people to maybe flavors or recipes that they've not experienced before?
Oh, it's everything from human nutrition, because the nutrition profile in pork, it's one of the most nutrient-dense products you can buy in a grocery store. And we have the research that shows it's great from child development all the way to bone strength, muscle mass, cognitive health in the elderly. So it's just it's a superfood, right? Part of that is they understand the nutritional value, but then also the taste and flavor. And yes, we have recipes to show them that and give them ideas how to prepare pork and how to season it. And it's a whole package.
So it's much larger than, here, I'm going to email you a recipe that you may enjoy with ground pork.
Yes, it's all about winning the hearts and minds of consumers. And part of that's trust that we're doing everything right with animal welfare, that we're doing everything right with pig health. We care about our employees, we care about our environment, we care about everybody.
I think most folks know the Pork Board's most successful campaign, which was, the other white meat, back in the 80s and 90s, describing pork. But this feels a little bit different, where maybe that was kind of a broader campaign to everybody. This, once again, as you've mentioned, the segmentation is very focused. So can you kind of describe some of the differences between the two?
The other white meat had the place in the time, but we're unapologetic this time. We're not the other anything anymore, right? Pork's the number one consumed protein in the world. And we want to make it the number one consumed protein in the United States. And this is the job that the National Pork Board was tasked to do. We do research, education, and promotion, leading with promotion. And the future of our industry depends on this. We did the consumer study, and what we found out was the younger generation is not consuming pork like the older generation. And they consume it differently. They have desires for convenience and eating it differently. So we're taking that data, we're taking that insights, and we're trying to win over that younger generation. And that's all about the future of the pork industry. We want to give them what they want. We want to show them what pork can do for them. So taste what pork can do.
And I remember at the launch, one of the things Dr. Newman mentioned is that producers who are already active pork consumers may not see this campaign themselves. And that's actually okay, because that means the resources are being expended on folks that may not be hearing this messaging every day. Why may they not see it?
Yeah, so this is targeted at the high population areas, and I think we all know that most of the people in the U.S. live along the coast. I think there's half the population lives in 10 states. And so that's what we're targeting. We're targeting the high population areas where we can make the best return on checkoff dollars.
We've talked a lot about the domestic market, and obviously we want folks in the States here to be eating our pork that we're producing at home. But we also know that about 30% of our products are sent overseas. So what's going on with the international markets? Are you guys continuing your efforts in that area?
We absolutely are. We'll never take our foot off the gas on the international export market. The thing that I need to explain to producers and consumers in the U.S. is the U.S. consumer loves bacon. So we eat almost all the bacon. We eat most of the ribs. But there's parts of the pig that other parts of the world like to consume that we don't in the U.S. And so the pig is dissected into many parts and many pieces and exported all over the world. A lot of our hams go to Mexico. A lot of loins go to Japan. A lot of what we call variety meats, the things that we don't really eat in the U.S., go to the Asian countries. So it's a worldwide market. It always will be a worldwide market. But this campaign is mostly focused on domestic demand and improving that. Winning over the younger generation is a huge part of this domestic campaign. So that's our emphasis. And if you really want to learn and watch and follow what we're doing with the Taste What Pork Can Do campaign, go to porkcheckoff.org and follow us. Sign up and you'll get your weekly or bi-weekly newsletters and you'll see what we're doing.
Thanks, Al. I know we're a bit biased here in Iowa, but pork really is a remarkably healthy and versatile protein. And when you top that off with the fact that it's being provided by dedicated farm families right here in Iowa and across the nation, you've got a great case for Americans to taste what pork can do. If you'd like to learn more about how the National Pork Board is promoting pork at home and abroad, we've put links to pork.org and the Pork Checkoff website down in the notes for this episode. Okay, next up is a topic I'm guessing you're all a little less familiar with. While Iowa is well known as the nation's leader in pork, you might only be vaguely familiar with the agrivoltaics project that's generating a literal buzz in Ames. For more on that, here's spokesman reporter Bob Beyond with a couple of the Iowa State University researchers who are helping lead the project, entomology professor Dr. Matt O'Neill and the executive director of Iowa State's Electric Power Research Center, Dr. Ann Kimber.
Matt, hey, let's start with the big picture. Can you tell us how this project first came about? What led Iowa State University and Alliant Energy to partner on this agrivoltaics project? And what has it taken to get to this point?
Alliant Energy has an interest in expanding their renewable energy portfolio beyond wind into solar. And Iowa State is interested in reducing their operation costs and continuing their leadership in the area of all things agriculture. And these two groups came together to explore developing a solar farm at land in and around the university and exploring the larger topic of what's called agrivoltaics, which is just a fancy word for saying farming under and around solar panels. And after some initial conversations, both sides agreed that it would be in everybody's best interest to work together, and that led to the development, construction, and now the ongoing farming and solar energy production at the Alliant Energy Solar Farm at Iowa State University.
How many years are we into this project now?
We're into our second field season, but we started working with Alliant going back 2022, 23, in terms of discussing what could be possible at a solar farm for research, extension, and education.
Well, now that the project is up and running, where do we stand today? Are the panels fully operational? Crops are growing underneath them?
Yes to both of those. Construction was initiated in 2023, and it was operational in 2024 for electricity. We began farming as early as the fall of 2023, preparing the ground, planting some perennials, and then full farming took place in the spring of 2024. So we've got one full field season under our belt, and we've started a new one this year.
So I know we started with some crops in 2024. Maybe you can highlight a few of the crops that you planted last year, and where we're at this year and how they're all performing under the solar panels.
Yeah, so I might take a step back and say the concept, the idea, the practice of farming under solar panels includes pretty much all the forms of agriculture that people practice. Just depends upon what the solar developer and the farmer are willing to do when it comes to working together. What we learned early on was that the site was going to be about 10 acres, and Alliant was interested in modifying some of the solar panels to help us explore how height and different panel configurations could affect farming. And I'm telling you all this to explain why we explored the types of farming that we did. So given 10 acres, it's really challenging to make a living on such a small land if you're growing corn and soybeans. But that's not the case for our fruit and vegetable farmers. So given that small footprint, we went with exploring fruits and vegetables that are commonly produced in Iowa, in the Midwest, that you'd find on the shelves. We went with a project that has 5 fruits and vegetables: summer squash, broccoli, bell pepper are the vegetables. The fruits are strawberries and raspberries. And those were our first 5 crops. We also added in what we call a grass clover control. If you weren't going to do any farming at a solar site, that's what would be sort of the baseline to maintain the soil, keep it in place, provide ground cover. And then there's this other thing that we wanted to know is, could you practice conservation at a site like this? So we added an additional type of vegetation, which is a mix of native, perennial, flowering plants that we know are attractive to honeybees and native bees. And if you're keeping score at home, that's 8 treatments. And we added those into an experimental design that allows us to test which provides the best ground cover, which provides the most economic benefit, and over time would be of value to all that are interested in this piece of land. And we're asking another big question, which is, does that vegetation affect energy production? All of the panels are what are called bifacial. They produce energy from the direct sunlight and also reflecting sunlight off the ground. So as you can imagine, if you can see this in the world of podcasting, that ground cover is going to reflect light. And the different types of ground cover could reflect light differently. It could also produce a different microclimate, especially in the time of year when the summer's hot, that those plants transpiring could produce a microclimate that in other systems have cooled the panels and made them more efficient, which is kind of exciting if you think about it, because when do we have the greatest electricity demand? When it's hottest, when we're running air conditioning. And when those panels are hot and the vegetation under them is cooling them, makes that whole system even more efficient, more effective.
So on the crop side, have you seen any surprising or unexpected results? Anything you can share with us? Maybe top 2-3 things that you're seeing so far these first 2 years.
Yeah, in the first year, some of the crops we knew we couldn't get a harvest off of because they were perennials. So it takes a while for things like the raspberries and the perennial varieties of strawberries to establish. So within those treatments, we can't really say much other than, hey, they survived, which in some ways is a success, given we had a pretty harsh winter storm that killed almost all of the raspberries that are in our open field control. So the microclimate under the panels provided some protection. During the field season, that first year, there were some winners and there were some losers. We found with broccoli, the yield was lower when the broccoli was grown between the panels than it is in the open air control. Squash, though, opposite. Total opposite. The yields were greater when the squash was grown between the panels than in the open field control. And I think the same was true for peppers. What was true for all of them, when we measure plant growth, height, volume, plants grow bigger, taller in the solar farm than in the open air. And we think that's for a couple of reasons. One, plants are looking for sunlight, so they're growing out to capture as much as possible. And under the panels, thanks to work from our engineers, we know that it's cooler and a bit wetter. So it's an interesting microclimate for plants because, yeah, it's not getting full sun, but a lot of plants don't need full sun. And if it's cooler and wetter, the growing conditions are a little bit softer, a little bit easier for some of those plants. So to make a long story short, we had some losers who put a lot of time putting on a lot of vegetative growth and not producing harvestable yield. But then we have some winners that did that and produced more harvestable yield. And this is why we're doing the project. We need to find out which plants, which crop options work best in the setting so that when farmers come to take advantage of this land, they'll be in a good position to reap the greatest benefits.
So quick note between last year and this year then, did you do some things different this year to maybe look at some other options?
Yeah, so we're continuing with the same 5 fruits and vegetables because we want to see over the long term how those produce given different growing seasons. Any farmer knows, you can't really learn anything from just one season. You got to kind of see how things work over time. But given how well some things did, we've expanded into other parts of the solar farm, and we've added some crops. One of them is grapes. That one was a little bit of a late addition, but it's mirroring what we saw with raspberries. Did really well under the panels, didn't really survive outside. And then for the vegetables, we've added tomatoes, and we've expanded the pepper production to some different configurations of panels that are at the site. All of our focus so far has been in one portion of the farm that mimics the panel configurations for a utility scale solar farm. These are panels that are on a torque tube that track the sun, and they're at a height that's about 5.5 feet off the ground. Our utility partner, Alliant Energy, tells us that as they look to expand solar production, that's the configuration that they would go with to maximize energy production. We have other configurations that we're exploring that are on a fixed tilt basis, a little bit cheaper to build, but they don't produce as much electricity. So we started in the industry standard, and now we're expanding in the second year into those alternative configurations. We've got both new crops and then crops growing in new areas this year.
So Ann, I thought maybe we'd talk a little bit about the energy side of things. Are you seeing any early indications that growing crops under or near the panels is impacting energy production, either positively or negatively?
Well, I have a kind of an unsatisfying answer to this, and basically we're not seeing any effect, positive or negative. Part of that is because of the kinds of data we were able to collect in the first year. These are complicated. It's unusual what we're doing to measure energy production experimental unit by experimental unit. So we have basically 17 panels that are over a plot, and we're trying to measure the energy production just from those 17 panels. And we had some technical difficulties getting that done, but we have resolved those problems. So I'm hoping that you'll check back with us in late July or early August, because we expect that we're going to see the biggest impact on the hottest days of the year, because that's when the microclimate cooling the panels is going to have the biggest impact on increasing solar production. In other studies, it's been found that growing crops under panels can maybe increase production 3 to 5%. And that's what we're looking to see. We do know that there's a microclimate difference between the panels, and there are these 4 different configurations of panels, versus the open areas. It's definitely cooler under the panels than it is in the open areas. But we haven't seen a dramatic, measurable, statistically significant impact of the crops. Part of that is because we're mostly, except for raspberries and grapes, we're mostly growing the crops between the panels, not directly underneath them. So the microclimate impacts are a little bit muted there, but that's what we're working on.
So you talked about the microclimate underneath the panels. Are you seeing that affect soil moisture, temperature, pest pressure maybe?
One of the amazing things is that there seems to be less Japanese beetle pressure on the grapes and the raspberries under the panels. That was shocking to us. But that seems to be one thing. It does seem to be cooler and wetter, both in the soil and in the air temperature above those panels. So you would think that that could be good or bad, right? You could have more mold problems. You could have more various kinds of fungal problems. We haven't seen that yet, but we're very interested in studying that. We've been working with a sensor engineer, Liang Dong, who's going to be increasing the numbers and kinds of measurements we're making this year, not only temperature and relative humidity, but also reflected light measurements under the panels to see what impacts those might have as well.
So in general, why is solar energy an attractive option addressing the increasing demand for energy overall?
From our point of view in the power group, it's incredibly difficult to build new generation. It's 7 to 12 years to build conventional power plants, 7 to 10 years to build a transmission line. It's really difficult. Not just the supply chain problems that we're experiencing now, but also the interconnection queues. It's really complicated and difficult. Solar represents something that's scalable. It's manageable. It's low tech compared with building a 345 kV transmission line. You can add as things are working and you can buy the panels. The panels are becoming less expensive and more efficient all the time. These bifacial panels represent a technological breakthrough that is great for us. I think that's why solar is so attractive. People can try it, they can add on as they can. It's not like building a small modular nuclear reactor. The other thing is that the capacity value of solar is now 100% in the MISO market for all seasons except the winter season when it's a 0% capacity factor. But that means that solar has a capacity value, and that really matters to the markets, that it offers capacity as well as energy value.
Well, and demand is obviously increasing as well. I think of data centers for AI, expansion of manufacturing in the U.S., so solar plays a part in that.
It definitely does. And large utilities are adding solar. Now, Mid-American is adding a significant amount of solar plus natural gas capacity to back that up. You still need to back up the solar. We all know that it's a variable resource, but it has more value now than in the past.
I've heard engineers say about any technical problem, good, fast, cheap. You get to pick two. But I've heard Ann and others talk about solar and some renewable energy as being good, fast, and cheap. And given that there already is increasing demands for electricity, this is fueling the interest and expansion of solar. And that expansion is going to be nationwide. It's not just Iowa. And it's not going to be everywhere. And it needs certain conditions, which unfortunately often overlap with what makes good farmland. However, it's not going to be all the farmland. It's going to be a small fraction. So I'll give you some context. The solar farm at Iowa State is a 10-acre portion of a larger 500 to 600 acre field. And that small section of 10 acres has a lease agreement that is about 3 times more than what we would earn if we were just growing corn and soybeans. So the way to think about solar is not it's going to take over farmland. I think the way to think about it is it's going to supplement farmland. It can be at utility scale where you partner with a developer like Alliant. It can be a partnership that results in a 20-plus year lease that provides stable income for a farmer, unlike often what happens with farming, where you have up and down years. What we're trying to get at is, can you continue to profitably use that land under the panels? So far, there's some evidence that, if you're thoughtful about the crops you choose and the way you farm, that is possible. We've talked about the fruit and vegetable production. Livestock grazing production at solar is really interesting. We're not currently doing that for 4-legged animals. We're doing it for 6-legged animals. We have honeybees that we're keeping at the site. And the honeybees in the first year did not do well. They produced a honey crop, but it was about a third of the average honey crop for Iowa.
Yeah, so you mentioned being excited about these pollinator possibilities. What progress are we making there?
The progress is really remarkable, and it's faster than I expected. We planted native perennial plants that are commonly found in prairies. These typically take 3 years to establish if you're doing a prairie reconstruction. We also seeded in clover as a pretty obvious forage for honeybees. If you talk to beekeepers, they love clover. That's where they make most of their honey. If you go to any grocery store and you buy honey, it's mostly clover and soybean honey. Our clover really took off this year, and we have already gotten a honey crop that in the first month of 2025 that we got for all year in 2024. The clover came on strong in the spring. It established well between and around the panels, and I think beekeepers have told me that they look for sites with clover to put their bees because they know they can get a substantial honey crop. There's still a lot of the growing season left, and it'll be curious to see if the microclimate under the panels maintains that flowering vegetation longer than it would if there weren't the panels there. So that's six-legged livestock. Outside of our site, we've been communicating our results and talking with other solar developers and communities that have solar farms, and they talk about using sheep to graze their site as a way to reduce mowing costs, but also to support a form of livestock production. I think the future is thinking bigger, and there will likely be bigger solar farms that could support larger livestock. The question is, can we come up with a configuration, a forage mix, and a forage program that would allow some form of cattle to graze at these sites that could be as big as 100 some acres?
So we touched on this a little bit. Talking about the Iowa farmer, how might this project influence how farmers and communities think about using land for solar plus agriculture?
I hope if a community is interested in this, they take a moment to think big picture and not sort of stay siloed into thinking about any piece of land as being used for just one purpose. So we have to be really efficient about our land use practices. Solar and agrivoltaics are a way to get multiple uses out of the same piece of land. And that takes some planning. And our group took, 2 years before we got to a point with Alliant that they were comfortable with the idea of farmers being in and around their site. So I think a take-home message is to start thinking maybe deeply about how that land could be used, and if possible, use what we've set up as a model for how to develop the site access agreement, the lease agreement, and then the farm plan so that you can get multiple uses out of the same piece of land.
I think the idea of imagining that you're going to have solar development next to your community, how do you best want to do that? And then taking the time to get a site access agreement so that people can actually work on that site safely is really, really important. And that was one of the things that led to the success with Alliant, was we were able to come on. We were trusted. We went through special training, but we can access the site as we need to. I think it is possible to come up with solutions that really can benefit communities and the farmers who own these sites. It does take planning, and I think that's why this demonstration here has been so valuable, is because we have gone through the pain of figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and have some interest in innovation. And that gives me hope, because I think of Iowa farmers as being extremely innovative people and would be interested in this kind of project and consider other kinds of crops beyond what we've done. We have gotten requests last year about people who are interested in seed production for different kinds of forages. There's so many other things that could be considered that we haven't been able to do here, but we want to do, or we see a value to doing. We get a lot of questions about grazing and how the panels should be configured for grazing, and how would you develop the site so you had adequate water for grazing animals with solar production. I think there's a lot of interesting topics to discuss there.
I would just say that the big picture is to think about how solar could lead to multiple uses. And it's not going to be a big piece of land. These are not going to be thousands of acres at any one site. They'll probably be modest. Ours is fairly small. 10 acres is what would be considered community scale, maybe at the small end of utility scale. But these sites offer opportunities for multiple uses, and those multiple uses come with multiple revenue streams. There's a lease payment that goes to the landowner. There can be site management fees that are paid to third parties to mow and maintain the vegetation. And then if a site access agreement is worked out between the solar developer and a farmer, well, now you've got an additional form of revenue. Our economists have started to survey and talk to solar developers, not only in Iowa, but around the country. And what they've heard from some of these companies is not only are they interested in agrivoltaics, but they also would provide incentives to have farmers come into the site and farm, because it's in their best interest, because it reduces their operation and maintenance costs, and they see greater community acceptance when that happens. One of the biggest barriers to new farmers practicing agriculture is land access. A lot of people would like to try farming. this is a way to kind of get your foot in the water, for a small site, develop a farming program. Probably mix fruits and vegetables could be a way, but it doesn't have to be. And then after that, you're building the site for multiple revenue streams and multiple community benefits.
So building on that a little bit, looking 5 to 10 years down the road, what's your biggest hope for this project? What it could inspire?
Yeah, the biggest hope is we can be of value to multiple stakeholders in Iowa and beyond. That we can be of value to our farming community so that they can make informed decisions about if they want to lease farmland for solar development and then explore agrivoltaics. We can be of value to our utility partners to find out how best to manage vegetation, both for short-term gains in terms of power production, but also long-term gains for maintaining and growing soil health, expanding different forms of agriculture. Kind of real long-term, if this were to take off, one of the things that I think about is how can we further optimize these locations for farming?
Let's finish with the student participation, which is absolutely huge for this project. How are ISU students involved in the project, and what kind of educational opportunities has this created for them?
Yeah, we were fortunate to early on get a fairly substantial grant from the Department of Energy to explore how farming could be done out of the panels. And that grant has allowed us to bring in several students from several disciplines to conduct research, both in farming and in the engineering aspects. So we've got a couple students in horticulture, one in entomology, working with the honeybees, one in natural resource management, helping with the economic analysis, and then I think we have 2, possibly more, in the background, graduate students in engineering, helping us measure the microclimate and the energy production. And that's just at the graduate student level. Then we've brought in undergraduates to help those students, and that wasn't hard. Once they saw the site, we had a lot of students asking, hey, can we get involved in this? And in addition to the students who are going to the site, several classes have brought students out to the site for tours and learning more about renewable energy and the possibility of farming in and around a solar facility. And that's the teaching. Then there's the outreach and extension. Last year we had visitors from pretty much every continent but Antarctica come to the site. And when we asked them, I was like, well, why are you coming here? And they're like, well, we don't see anything like this anywhere else, where you're producing energy and farming at the same time and at a utility scale. Now we have organized a series of open houses to encourage Iowans and others to come to the site, sign up, take an hour-and-a-half tour, walk around the panels, see the farming, talk to some of the faculty and students. So come to our website and sign up for that. You have to RSVP only because we want to make sure we have enough of the hard hats for everybody. It's agrivoltaics.research.iastate.edu. And if you Google ISU agrivoltaics, our website is the first one that comes up. And on the front page, there's the link to RSVP for the open houses that are scheduled throughout the summer and fall of 2025. And there's also contact information if somebody just wants to ask a couple of questions. They can do that as well through our email.
Lots of interesting insight from Dr. O'Neill and Dr. Kimber. You know, one of the great things about having a leading ag university right here in the heart of our state is that we can see research happening firsthand. When it comes to a new field like agrivoltaics, we know there are lots of questions, and the best way to get answers is to see a project like this for yourself. If you'd like to participate in one of the open house events at the Alliant Energy Solar Farm in Ames, which are being held throughout the summer and early fall, we've included a free registration link down in the notes for this podcast episode. That's all for this edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll join us for our next episode on July 21st. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.